One school in Alabama is charging a fine on its unvaccinated students who are returning to campus in the fall. The University of Pennsylvania is turning a blind eye to the correlation between police presence and public safety, and student athletes at the University of Hawaii will not be able to compete in sports unless they are vaccinated. I'm Ophelia Jacobson, and this is the Campus Countdown. For our number 3 story of the week, if students at Birmingham Southern College want to stay unvaccinated, they'll have to pay the school $500. The Alabama institution is charging every student a $500 fee in order to, quote, offset continual weekly antigen testing and quarantining. Though fully vaccinated students will receive an immediate $500 rebate, unvaccinated students will only get the money back after they become vaccinated. In addition to this policy, the university is also mandating weekly COVID-19 testing and a separate move-in date for unvaccinated students. Birmingham Southern College states that they are instituting the additional fee because of, quote, a lack of federal funds for the pandemic precautions this term. But as of June 30th, the college still has $140,076 remaining in the institutional portion of its allocated CARES Act Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund total. The new guidelines also include punishment for those who fail to comply. BSC's new protocol allows for the revocation of online access to school material that are, quote, essential to academic success for students who do not follow the new guidelines regarding masks. Look, the bottom line is no one's education should depend on vaccination, and they shouldn't be charged for it either. Campus Reform has been tracking higher education institutions that are implementing this no-vax tax just in time for the fall semester. Look, just last month, we were the first to report on Rhodes College, who is charging unvaccinated students a $1,500 health and safety fee each semester. If a university wants to teach students to think for themselves, well, they have to let them make their own decisions about a vaccine that, keep in mind, hasn't even been approved by the FDA yet. Campus Reform has talked with many students who are hesitant about getting the vaccine, and it's because they've done their own research and are still uncertain of the long-term side effects. Colleges were some of the first institutions to force these vaccine mandates on their students, and they were successful. And we all know that what happens on college campuses eventually seeps into mainstream society. We're seeing that already happen. Look, the state of New York just announced it will be requiring proof of vaccination for indoor dining and fitness. This all started on college campuses. Unvaccinated Americans are now being treated like second-class citizens, both on campus and now in everyday life. Switching gears now, the Defund the Police movement is running rampant on our college campuses like never before, especially at the University of Pennsylvania. Here to tell us more about that story is Campus Reform correspondent Peter Cordy.
Thanks, Ophelia. For our second story of the week, as part of the University of Pennsylvania's police reform, the committee decided to downplay the value of crime reduction in evaluating the performance of the campus police department. You heard that right. Despite a sharp rise in violent crime, including homicide, this committee is considering other outcomes besides crime reduction as part of the school's police reform, which includes reallocating funds used to keep a police presence nearby to protect students and locals, otherwise known as defunding the police. According to a report out of CBS Philly, the city of brotherly love now has the highest murder rate in the country per capita out of our nation's 10 largest cities. You'd think that reducing crime would be the desired outcome here. Evidently not. Well, it is at least not the only outcome the committee thinks should be used to evaluate the performance of the police department, and they say of their intent to reduce police presence in the crime-infested area, quote, armed police are not the only approach by which physical safety can be protected. What other approach is there? Gender-inclusive safe spaces? All of this leads me to ask some simple questions. How exactly are you going to better protect a population ravaged by homicide and violent crime while removing your focus on reducing said crime? And how will reducing the presence of armed police officers make anyone safer in a city with one of the highest homicide rates in the country? We have seen massive crime rate spikes in cities around the country who implemented similar policies like New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Houston, Minneapolis, and with UPenn sitting right next to West Philly, one of the most dangerous parts in an already dangerous city, do you really think defunding the police will have a different result? You're playing politics with the lives of kids, even freshmen right out of high school, putting them in danger by shifting your focus away from reducing crime and instead reducing police presence. Parents, do you feel safer sending your kid to UPenn after hearing this? As a college student, I'd like to feel safe on and off campus, and I'd like to know that if anything happens, I can rely on a strong police presence to protect me and my peers. Students at UPenn, I'm sorry, but you might just be deprived of that feeling of security, and you can thank this Committee on Police Reform. Back to you.
Thanks, Peter. And for our top story of the week, unvaccinated student athletes at the University of Hawaii will not be allowed to compete on sports teams. The decision was made by University of Hawaii's athletic department after consulting with a university medical committee. Students may apply for an exemption to the COVID-19 vaccine mandate for religious or medical reasons, according to the Star-Advertiser. Quote, in addition to health and safety reasons, we want to avoid cancellations of games and practices due to exposures, isolation, and quarantine, a university press release stated. The University of Hawaii has yet to report the vaccination rate for its sports teams. Campus Reform talked to multiple student athletes at the University of Hawaii to hear what they had to say about the policy. Mackenzie Leneve, a softball player at the school, disagreed with the policy. She said, personally, I do not agree with student athletes having to get vaccinated to play sports. I know the staff at the University of Hawaii are doing this to ensure our safety, but what about our right to choose what we want to do with our bodies? Each student at the University of Hawaii takes pride in our state. We represent Hawaii, but we will not represent a school that forces us to get vaccinated in order to play the sport we love. Mackenzie's got it absolutely right. No student should be forced to get vaccinated simply to be able to play ball. These student athletes have probably worked their entire lives to get their athletic scholarships, only to be stripped away of those privileges due to an experimental vaccine. Now, these students have to choose between their athletic career and their medical autonomy. And just to point out, a Johns Hopkins study shows that young adults like me are less likely to contract serious cases of COVID-19. So why would we force a vaccine on a population that is relatively low risk when it comes to the virus? Not to mention, these student athletes are the ones keeping themselves healthy and fit. They're even at a lower risk. Right now, we are witnessing an attempt to create two different sectors in society, the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. It's the same with charging students fines. What kind of message does this send to students who are supposed to be the next generation of leaders? If they were put under these types of authoritarian policies in college, they're going to think those types of policies are normal when they step into positions of power in the future. And for our woke tweet of the week, a professor at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities is pushing back against the school's decision to hire more police officers, only fueling the defund the police movement even more. Nate Mills, a professor of English, criticized the school in a tweet saying, quote, inconsistency with the city of Minneapolis, the University of Minnesota has decided in the city of the George Floyd uprising and continued racist police violence that it too needs more police officers. The July tweet came in response to an email that the university sent out to all students, faculty, and staff. It stated that the university's police department will begin the hiring process for 3 new officers to replace previous ones who had retired. The addition of the new officers will bring the university's total number to 61. This professor is obviously forgetting that there is a direct correlation between public safety and police presence. This professor's rhetoric on Twitter is dangerous because it is painting a false reality about the police force and their role in communities across the country. And if students are following this professor on Twitter, they're going to get the same idea and develop an anti-police mindset. This professor is clearly being naive and idealistic when it comes to reimagining a world without the police. If he really believes that the police are bad and unnecessary, I would love to sit down and ask him who would replace law enforcement on the streets, or who he would call if he was in danger. This type of tweet is only fueling the defund the police movement on college campuses that we at Campus Reform have been covering for years. Those are all the top stories we have for you today. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. You can also follow along with all of the college craziness on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Campus Reform. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Campus Countdown, so be sure to tune in then. But for now, I'm Ophelia Jacobson. Thanks for watching.